Welcome to the Blitz Take episode number 12. I am here with Emily Van Buskirk, and she is covering college football worldwide, and I'm excited to hear what she has to say about this upcoming season.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to talk football.
So my first question is, what are some of the most intriguing games that you are going to see?
Ooh, that is a really good question. And it's definitely something that's becoming more and more real as we look down the dog days of summer here. My partner in crime, Kim Montoro, who's my photographer, we're the only female writer photographer group that goes around the country covering college football. And we just started kind of planning out our season. And what we do is we look at the overall schedule each week and we circle games that are intriguing to us. We circle big games, of course, because that's kind of where like all the money is. But we also look at, unique environments, and we look at places that we could hit in one weekend. So for example, the first weekend, we're looking at Tulane and UMass, which at first blush is not a very interesting game. I think it's interesting because how does Tulane schedule a school like UMass? They have a first year head coach for this season. So they're going to be kind of an interesting team to watch. But that same weekend in New Orleans, you have LSU is playing Florida State at the Saints Stadium. So, by being there in New Orleans and going to the Tulane game and kicking off the season that way, we're able to hit two games in one weekend, which is a goal of ours to try and get as much coverage as we can. And then you look down the line, and I think it's in late October, early November, there's a stretch of games that's really interesting that starts at Marshall. Marshall's playing a home game, and Marshall is one of my favorite environments to go to. It's so incredible. If you're a college football fan, you should definitely go to Huntington, West Virginia. I mean, that program is just something else. So excited to get out there and see Charles Huff coach. And then, so that's like a Thursday night game. And then I think Friday, there's either West Virginia or Virginia Tech. And then Saturday is the other of that. So we're going to do Marshall, West Virginia, and Virginia Tech all in one weekend. And we're going to drive from each school to cover the game. So it's not so much the matchups that always intrigue me. It's the environments and kind of seeing what the schools like to do on game day and what their college football fans are like that really draw me to a place. So I'm excited to maximize our season and get as many new environments as we can.
I would love if you could come to Rutgers one day.
We tried that. We have a funny history with Rutgers. We tried to cover a Rutgers game because Kim lives in New Jersey. And so we're out there. My sister lives in New York. We're out there all the time. And, we wanted to cover a Rutgers game. So we applied last year and they denied us credentials. So I was like, we're out here covering, everywhere and everything, but for some reason we can't cover Rutgers. So, it's a little bit of a sore spot for us, but Mike Burton, one of my favorite players of all time, the fullback for the Chiefs, went to Rutgers. So I do have a special place in my heart for them, but they need to get it together and give us a credential.
Actually, I was just at their fan fest.
How was it?
It was really cool.
Good. Are Rutgers fans excited for the season?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Good.
So what are your thoughts on Penn State and their football program?
Ooh, that is I feel like that's a loaded question. My experience, they're not the same team they used to be, right? And I think that Penn State fans, and they've had a hard time making peace with that, that the program hasn't been as successful as they'd like to be. And I got to say, one of the most heartbreaking games that I saw last year was when Penn State played at Iowa. We were there at Kinnick Stadium, and we saw Sean Clifford get hurt in that game, and he had a pretty bad injury and he didn't come back in. And so Iowa ended up beating them, and it was this huge, I guess, upset, even though really it wasn't. I mean, it was a big deal, but it wasn't, the Iowa fans were excited. They rushed the field, but that was my first time seeing Penn State live, and in person, they're very impressive. I mean, their guys are big. They're definitely like an old school football program, really big linemen, a lot of athletic talent at the running back position and the wide receiver position. And Sean Clifford, I think, is a great quarterback. So it was just unfortunate that we saw him, go down like that. So barring any crazy injuries, I'm hoping that we see Penn State kind of make it back into the place they used to be. And honestly, James Franklin's still there, so it can't be that bad yet. So I think, Penn State fans should keep their heads up. I think it's tough. I'm hoping to see more production, bigger wins this year would be great for them. But I know that they're trying to find their footing after losing, they've had big name players like Saquon Barkley in the past, and they've kind of pinned their seasons on those kind of guys. And they haven't really had one like that in the last year or two. So I think they're going to need to pull together as a team and do a little bit of committee work as opposed to trying to just rest all of the production on one guy's shoulders. So it'll be interesting, but this could be the year we finally see them get back to it.
What are your thoughts on their schedule, and do you see them getting a big bowl game down the road?
That's it. God, you're coming with the questions today. All right. Let's look at their schedule. Penn State is one of those teams. I know we talked about Purdue as their first game. I know you mentioned that. And I think that's I like that game because Purdue is a good football program. I know people don't really buy into that much, but the Boilermakers, I like the way they play. I like how they coach, and they're a tough team to beat physically. So I think that right off the bat is going to be a good test for Penn State, but not overwhelming. Like it's not Alabama, it's not LSU, or I guess you wouldn't even see LSU at this point, or Clemson or whomever. But Purdue is a very good litmus test and will be tough for that first game when you're looking to get, all the rush shaken off. So that'll be hard fought. But then you look through their schedule and they get home against Ohio, which will be a nice game to recover from that first one and get stuff together and try things out against an opponent like that. But then they go right back at it and head to Auburn, which is crazy because playing at Auburn is not easy, even in the post Gus Malzahn era, not an easy team to beat, even with all their turmoil going on. And then they got Central Michigan at home, again, another good recovery game. So they have a really good cadence in their schedule of tough game, recovery game, tough game, recovery game. And that's something I've talked to a lot of head coaches this offseason about when they look at a schedule, what do they see? What do these, fans look at it and they tally up wins and losses. But when coaches look at it, they look at how many home games do we have? Do we have any, Thursday or Friday night games, which makes the week short? Do we have like a long travel days? Do we have a lot of back-to-back travel weekends because that can affect productivity and all that? So when you look at Penn State's schedule, it's like hit and miss because then you go Northwestern at home. Northwestern, I never know what they're going to be. They are technically good, but I also saw them get routed by Iowa 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and they didn't score any points. So I don't really know. That's kind of we'll see. But then they go to Michigan. Then again, they get Minnesota at home. So that's that flip-flop of like going into a really hard environment at Michigan, which is tough. And I don't know that you win that game with the way that, Jim Harbaugh is rolling right now. But then you get to come home and play Minnesota. And then you get Ohio State at home, which is huge. I know, I that's a game you got circled on your calendar for sure if you're a Penn State fan. So, their schedule is very manageable, even though it has a lot of tough opponents. It's laid out in a way that I think bodes for their success this year. So I think we could see them, only losing one or two of those games, maybe three at the most. So that's pretty good for a Penn State team.
I don't know if I told you, but I'm a diehard Penn State fan.
I don't think you mentioned that, but I was I fair? I wasn't too hard on them, was I?
Yeah, I've been a big fan of Deshaun Hamilton, who's now on I think the Denver Broncos.
Yeah.
And there's some other multiple ones that I can't remember, but just like the atmosphere of the stadium at every game is more than awesome. And I actually had a close friend back home that we got to go to one of the spring games to see them practice, and
Nice.
we also got to go to some regular season games, which was an awesome experience.
That's so cool. That's definitely on my
Yeah.
bucket list of places to go. I have friends, I have family in Happy Valley, and they're season ticket holders, and they say, the whiteout game is one of the coolest experiences in college football. So I definitely want to make it out for that. And it's just a very historical place. There's been great football played there throughout the years. And, I love that Manny Diaz is there. Manny Diaz, I think, is crazy that Miami let him go and they fired him. I think I don't understand it. I know people are saying he wasn't doing well, but Miami in general wasn't doing well. And I felt like he really understood the culture. So I'm interested to see how he does at Penn State as their new DC under James Franklin. And I didn't realize James Franklin has been there for 9 years. I mean, to quietly be head coach of a program for 9 years and, in the last few not have been as good, that means you've got a community there that they don't turn on him. So that's nice. It's not Texas where, you get a couple years and then if you don't win a game, you're out. So I think this year is going to be good. I feel better things coming for Penn State. So we'll see.
Actually, while you were talking, I totally forgot to mention Saquon Barkley.
Saquon.
Yeah.
He's one of the best. He was so fun to watch in college.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on how Sean Clifford will do and the prediction of what his performance might look like once the games begin?
Yeah, I think he's definitely a better quarterback than he got credit for, especially, with the injury last year. And I was just reading something about him where he's been working out like a crazy person and just wants to be, this next level guy this year. So I think that's good. He's working to make himself better on the field, but I've also heard, he's branding himself and he's pulling NIL deals together. So he's very focused on what it is. But I mean, this is his 6th season, right? I think it's his 6th season as their quarterback. So at this point, if you don't figure it out, I mean, you've had X amount of years to do it. This is the year you got to put it together and kind of lead this team. And he didn't really get the chance to do that last year for a full season. So I think this is the year he's going to do it. He's got all the tools. He's an incredibly balanced quarterback. He's very calm and cool and collected in the pocket. And he doesn't, when I've seen him play, he didn't make any rash, decisions. He was very good at staying consistent. And so I think that's the kind of guy you want leading your team. So I think he's gonna do well.
Yeah, I think the schedule seems to be like not as physical. Like there's some spots in there that they can really run away with, especially playing against teams like Ohio or anyone like that. And as a fan, I just like watching their offense. I'm a really big offensive guy, and I'd like to see how the quarterback develops with the young talent at wide receivers, and I just have a big interest in that type of the game of football.
Yeah, well, and I think their offensive coordinator last year was his first year, and so obviously, if anybody who knows anything about football knows that there's going to be transition with a new offensive coordinator. That's always the case, and I think that's why we saw them struggle. I mean, they averaged just 3.2 rushing yards per attempt, and they only scored about 25 points a game. So not really the high scoring offense you're used to at Penn State, but it's a transition. It takes time to put those systems into place. So I think this year, in year 2, you're going to see a better, more cohesive unit because everyone will be on the same page. They'll be getting used to the system. And especially with Clifford having the experience he does, I think this is going to be the year. I mean, you got to put it all together.
Mhm. So my next question is, what are your thoughts on the ACC, Big 12, and Pac-12 teams this year?
ACC, Big 12, Pac-12. Well, let's start with the Pac-12, shall we? Because that's kind of my bread and butter. A lot of people don't know, but actually maybe they do. I talk about this all the time. I got started in the Pac-12. That's how I kind of started my whole career, is covering Stanford any way I could. So the Pac-12 will always have a special place in my heart. Right now, it's breaking my heart to watch what's going on there and seeing, the idea that USC and UCLA might leave. And then what does the conference become? Do they add more teams? Do they all get siphoned off? Like, who knows at this point? It's really, it's a sad, scary time for this landscape of college football. But leaving all that aside, if you're just focusing on this year, it's going to be a fun year for the Pac-12. Stanford is down, so it's going to be a down year for the North, but it's going to be a really up year for the South. So you're going to see an extremely talented Utah team coming back to reclaim what's theirs and really make a but a push for the playoff this year. Because that's the one thing that's eluded Kyle Whittingham in his many years at the helm there at Utah. He wants to get to a college football playoff. That would be peak for him. So we're going to see them kind of being the team to chase in the South. And then there's a lot of hype about USC, new head coach Lincoln Riley, new attitude, new everything. I don't buy in yet, because first year head coaches anywhere, it takes time and adjustment. Like, you don't just walk out into the field and pick up wins. So I'm not sold on USC quite yet. I think it's going to take a little time. And that real test will come when they play Stanford in week 2. That's one of the hardest matchups in college football to have early on. Now, not because Stanford's necessarily difficult, but because their styles of play, they just clash. They're both big trench lineman guys. They both have quarterbacks that are, spread mobile guys. They generally have good talent at wide receiver, but it's just this iconic game in the Pac-12. You love to see week 2 because they kick the heck out of each other, and it's second week. So it's like, it's only going to get tougher. So we love that. As for like a dark horse in the South, maybe UCLA. I think Chip Kelly is going to figure things out finally. I think he's a great coach. It hasn't come together quite for them yet. And the apathetic fan base doesn't help, people not going to games and having to sell at the Rose Bowl is really hard, obviously. So, but UCLA should do well. I think they'll be up there. And then in the North, you have Oregon, obviously new head coach, Dan Lanning there, and they have a great new offensive coordinator, Kenny Dillingham. And I love him. He's one of my favorites. So it's going to be really fun to watch Oregon, what they put together. But a dark horse over in the North would be Oregon State. I love the Beavers. I love what Jonathan Smith is doing there. And it's a really hard place to play in Corvallis. So the teams that have to go up and play at Corvallis are going to find it difficult to get wins coming out of there. So Oregon State is definitely my team to watch in the Pac-12. So, and then let's talk about, do we want to do Big 12 or ACC? Which do you want to hear?
Probably ACC.
ACC? All right, let's do it. I'm normally an AAC girl. That's what I write for SB Nation. I do a lot of AAC stuff. But my partner in crime, Kim, she went to Clemson. So I've become a bit of a Clemsonite myself. I love Dabo Swinney and I love going out there. So
I actually follow Temple football also.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice. You like Temple?
I grew up outside of the Philly area.
Okay, yeah, Temple. Well, really tough watching last year. It was really hard to see it all go down that way, but very hopeful they're going to have, it's first year Stan Drayton, their head coach, but I think he's a really positive presence, and I think he's going to build something special there. It's going to take time, but I think you'll see even immediately a better attitude on the sideline. And because last year the players, they were upset, Rod Carey was it was toxic. And so this year, I think we're going to see them smiling and happy and maybe not as injured. So I like Temple. That's
Yeah.
a fun one. For ACC, let's see. All right. Well, we got Clemson, and that's really kind of the top of it. I feel like Clemson's gonna be all right there in the Atlantic. Who might challenge them? I don't know. My NC State every year, people always say, "Oh, they're good. They're gonna be good." The Wolfpack, they've never quite gotten there, so I'm not bought in. Florida State, it's tough. I love Mike Norvell, and I think he does great things, but they've definitely had an issue cultural wise. I don't know what it is, but there was some, issues going on in locker room. So they got to figure that out and nurture these new recruiting classes, because he's a great recruiter, but you got to develop the guys too. So I think that's the issue there. Let's go Louisville. I love Louisville as a dark horse team. They have a new offensive coordinator from Notre Dame that left there when the transition happened to Brian Kelly, and Lance Taylor. He's awesome. He's a very, very good offensive minded coach. And I love Satterfield. So I think Louisville is going to be my dark horse challenge pick in the Atlantic side of AAC. And then you look at Coastal, they put Miami so high. Mario Cristobal is in his first year there. That's very, very high to put a guy coming into this. I know he's a Miami guy. That's his home, area, but it's a very different program than he's been running at Oregon for those many years. It's a lot more loosey-goosey. He already got rid of the turnover chain. He's definitely changing the program into a more serious thing, but that's going to take time because these players are not used to that. So, and then you got Virginia, Pittsburgh, always solid squads, but never too impressive. North Carolina, everybody always talks about them. Maybe they'll get up in there. So maybe we'll see them this year. But I don't really see anyone in the Coastal making too much noise. It's always run by the Atlantic because you always have Clemson. So it's going to be fun to watch. I hope everyone's like, why doesn't Clemson leave the big, the ACC? But it's like, why would you? Why would you leave a conference where you're the best, and then go to another conference where it'd be a lot harder? I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. So yeah, that's the ACC. And then let's look at the Big 12. This is going to be crazy because it's going to be different, obviously, next year. So the last time we'll see it looking like this, but Oklahoma State, again, new year, new head coach for Oklahoma. So that's going to take a minute. And I was not impressed with how they looked last year. Spencer Rattler was not the best quarterback I've ever seen for being as hyped up as he was. Texas, this is a big year for Steve Sarkisian to see if he can actually bring Texas back where they need to be, but he's definitely in the hot seat a little bit. TCU is going to be interesting because you've got Sonny Dykes in the new position there, just having left, SMU to come over to Crosstown and coach TCU in the big boys program. So it'll be interesting to see him now back in a Power 5 position. And then, good old Texas Tech. One of my favorite places to go see a game is in Lubbock, Texas Tech. And so they've had a little bit of turmoil. They have a new head coach too. So there's a lot of new faces in the Big 12. It's gonna be interesting to see how the coaches vie, for the seat at the table in the top few. So should be fun to watch though. It's always a good shootout in the Big 12. Lots of points, no defense. It's a good time.
What are your thoughts on the slate of games for week 2 and week 3?
Week 2 and week 3. Let me pull up I have a big overarching schedule here. Let me pull them up. Because honestly, and I know this is a cliche thing to say, but it's like when you ask the coaches, hey, what do you think about this game down the road? And they're like, well, we're just focused on, week 1, that's what we're focused on. But that really, I get why they say that, because if you get too far down the road, it gets a little overwhelming. So let me look, because I've been focusing on week 1. All right, week 2, here we go. Oh, right off the bat, that Louisville. Okay, so that Louisville at UCF game on Friday night. So I was at the one last year when UCF played Louisville in Louisville. And that was the game that the UCF quarterback got hurt in, and it just kind of tanked their whole season. And it was on this crazy last minute, literally last 12 seconds of the game play. They were trying to throw a Hail Mary and he got hurt. And so everybody was really upset. Why would you do that? Why would you put our quarterback at risk? So that right there is going to be a grudge match game. So everyone, if you're interested in a good old Friday night throwdown. That Louisville UCF game is going to be really fun to watch because those guys are going to come out swinging at each other.
Mhm.
And the bounce house is always crazy. So that'll be fun. And then, of course, you have Alabama at Texas that Saturday, which is the biggest game of the weekend, of course. I don't think it's going to be that big a game because I think Alabama's going to roll right over them. So I'm not really that concerned about it. And then, Marshall and Notre Dame to me is going to be interesting because Notre Dame, while they are very good and elite, again, new head coach. So it's going to take some time to implement the system. And Marshall is a pretty gritty team. They always have very talented positional players, very athletic guys. So I think that's going to be kind of an interesting one to watch. I wish there was like a more fun, Houston at Texas Tech. So they are playing that one at Texas Tech, but last year that was the one loss that Houston had. Otherwise they would have had like an undefeated schedule, they would have gone to the AAC championship undefeated and, but they had this one loss lingering over them. And it was that one. So it's tough.
I was actually looking at the schedule and the game that came to my attention was Hawaii Michigan game.
Oh, Hawaii at Michigan. Yeah. That'll be interesting because Hawaii is another one of those teams. I just feel like we're saying this about so many teams that they had, a coaching change, a culture issue, which was really sad to see last year when, you had Todd Graham, who I've known for a long time and covered at ASU. And apparently he was just not a good leader of men there. So it was sad to hear, but the players spoke out and they actually brought about change and now they're going in a different direction. So that's tough for them because they have to travel so far for that game and like the time change and everything. That's really tough. But it'll be fun for them to play in such a historic, stadium. So that's awesome. What a great opportunity for the players. They get to be in the big house and hopefully the Michigan fans will pack it out and show them a good time. But yeah, that's definitely interesting.
I'm also a big late guy, like watching the 10-15 games. And I was wondering what your thoughts are on the Baylor BYU game. That's Saturday.
BYU. Yeah, I see that. That's a very good question. BYU. So this is what I think about BYU. They're playing one of my favorite teams, USF, in week 1. And most people would look at that and they would look right past USF and look at Baylor. So if you're BYU and you're going into the season, there is a big part of you that might look past that first game against South Florida and be focusing on the Baylor game because that's a big, big Big 12 matchup, big Power 5 matchup, and USF is a group of 5 school. But that being said, University of South Florida is about to have a good year. I spoke with their head coach, Jeff Scott, about this game in particular because it's a really tough game for them to play BYU week 1. But BYU has to go to South Florida to play it. And we're talking a middle of the day, barely September, humid, 100-degree weather in the beating sun in Florida for BYU, who is used to West Coast, more temperate weather in the mountains. It is going to be really hard. That game, I think they're going to look past it, but it's going to be tough. And I think USF wins that game. So I think BYU goes into Baylor already with a loss. So I don't think that's going to go very well for BYU. Now, to be fair, I'm not a big BYU person. I always think they're overhyped and everything, but I think Baylor's going to come in there and knock them on their butts a little bit because they're going to be struggling from that first week. So that would be my opinion about it. I think it'll be a good game to watch though, for sure.
I got 4 more questions.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on the Rutgers and Virginia schedule?
The Rutgers and Virginia schedule. Well, you know how I feel about Rutgers, but I will dedicate some airtime to them because you asked me, but normally I would not bring them up. Okay. So we've got at Boston College, should be a win if you're looking at it, versus Wagner at home should be a win. They play at Temple, which is a great game for you because it's both your
Yeah.
favorite teams. They should win that game because Temple is rebuilding. But then they got to host Iowa, and that's going to be really tough. Kirk
Mhm.
Ferentz coach teams are very, very hard hitting. Their quarterback Spencer Petras is great, so that's a tough stretch for Rutgers, where they have Iowa at home. They go to Ohio State. That's going to be hard. And then they get Nebraska at home and Indiana at home. And then they have to go to Minnesota. That one might be a little bit of a rest. Then they get Michigan at home. It's hard playing in the Big Ten.
Mhm.
If you're, unless you're Michigan, Ohio State, it's Penn State, even though if you're at the second half of the Big Ten, that's tough because you're playing just really aggressive physical teams every weekend. And Big Ten
Mhm.
football is my favorite kind of football because you have fullbacks, you have hat on hat contact, it's hard nosed, it's less throwing, more running the ball. I love to see it, but you got to feel bad for Rutgers a little bit because that's tough. They're going to get beat up every week, but I think they could come out of it. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, let's throw them 4, maybe 5 wins. Is that,
Mhm.
I mean, it's not terrible, but that's a tough schedule. Rutgers has a hard schedule.
Mhm.
I don't love that for them. What was the other team you want? What was the other one?
Virginia.
Oh, Virginia. Oh yeah, that's another team I've never been to Virginia. I've always wanted to cover there, but I'm not as familiar with the Cavaliers as I should be. But let's look at theirs.
My dad actually went there.
Oh, he did? That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
I've heard their game environments are super fun. So
Yeah, I know you mentioned the Tulane game.
Mhm.
My sister is starting her freshman year this weekend.
Oh my
at
gosh,
Tulane.
at Tulane?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. It's such a great school and it's so fun being right there in New Orleans, and it's really beautiful. A lot of brick buildings and like
Mhm.
columned, houses and it's gorgeous. She's going to love it. And is she a football fan too? Is she going to go to games?
She's more of like, I don't know how many games she's going to attend, but
Fair enough.
yeah.
Tell her she has to go to at least one because it's fun.
Yeah, I'll definitely let her know.
Well, Virginia looks like they start off a little bit easy. They've got Richmond at home, which will be a nice warm-up game. Then they go to Illinois. It's tricky. Illinois is sometimes a tricky team. I love a good, Brett Bielema coach team. So they can be tricky, but then you've got Old Dominion at home. So that's another good warm-up game. Then you go to Syracuse, not easy to play. That's a tough travel game,
Mhm.
play all the way at the Carrier Dome, but they should win that game. And then at Duke, they should win that. Louisville could come in and maybe make a little noise, but I wouldn't be too worried. At Georgia Tech, another pretty cool venue that I've been to. It's a very cool stadium in the city, but they should be okay there. And then they get a great stretch of home games. They get Miami at home, they get North Carolina at home, and Pittsburgh at home. That's huge to have all 3 of those in a row at home. And then an oddball curveball, they get Coastal Carolina coming in, which I got to tell you, that's one of my favorite teams in college football. And that should be a fun game because if Virginia is the old school, old college football program, the Chanticleers are the new school. So that's going to be a fun meeting of old versus new. And that'll be good. And then, the classic Virginia Tech game at the end. Who knows? I feel like that you could Rochambeau, rock, paper, scissors, who wins that game. But they've got a pretty good schedule. I think Virginia is going to make out okay if they can get through, some of these road games.
So my next question is, what made you want to work in the field that you're working in now?
That's a good question. So the short Cliff Notes version is I'm one of 2 girls in my family, and my dad, he never had a son. So I'm the oldest, and I became kind of the son he never had. And he took me to Stanford baseball games and Giants games and Stanford football games when I was very, very young. And we kind of became sports buddies in that regard. And I played soccer from a very young age at 4, and I played competitively starting at 9 in travel. So every weekend I was traveling to play soccer and, Olympic development level. And it was always my dream to play in college. So sports always was a big part of my life. My parents were marathoners. My dad had played baseball at Stanford. So it was just always there, and I just remember when I was in high school, I loved to watch Stanford basketball, Thursday nights, Pac-12 basketball with my dad after I finished my homework. So those are like good memories that I had. And then, I went to college. I was on scholarship to run cross country at a Division I school called St. Mary's. And I ended up running 3 years, and I quit and I played soccer. And I studied English creative writing because I was always a writer. I love to write short stories and poems and whatnot. So I picked that as my major, and I ended up graduating from Cal State East Bay, and I got into radio. Was my first medium in sports. And I was just helping produce on a morning show, and I fell in love with it, just all the hours and the conversation, and just being able to have a voice and an opinion in this world where there's not a lot of women. So I got a job kind of writing for a site, and I started just diving in, writing anything I could about any game I could get my hands on. I would travel a lot to things and try and, just cover as much as I could, whether it was football or basketball or baseball or even sand volleyball. And women's gymnastics in college is so interesting. So I would just chase as many stories as I could and started writing for more and more sites. And I was very lucky early on. I had a great mentor at ESPN. His name's Kevin Gemmel. And people always talk about women who support other women. And that's true. It's necessary. But the biggest advocate too, is having men in your corner supporting you and lifting you up and, showcasing your work and helping you be in the room and ask questions. I was terrified in press conferences to ask questions. Like, I was so scared the first year I covered football, I didn't ask a single question ever. I was just scared. And so, Kevin, he forced me one time. He made me ask one. He's like, you have to do this. You can't be afraid, and I feel bad because you see not a lot of women in these rooms. And when you do, it's a lot of men asking questions and commandeering the mic. And it's not easy to get your voice out there, but you just have to push. And that's kind of what I did. And so now every opportunity I have to speak on podcasts like this or talk to people and share thoughts, and I'll take it because I'm so grateful to do what I do. And I'm grateful to people like you for giving, women a voice. It's very nice. So appreciate it.
So my second to last question is, what has been your favorite memory and covering a game, either in college football or anything beside that?
Oh man, it's hard to choose one. I will tell you, there's been so many memories over the year. I think I'll settle on a couple. I'll briefly touch on. So one of the first exciting moments for me was when Christian McCaffrey was nominated for the Heisman. And my first story I ever did for a big outlet, Fox Sports, was about Christian. And I interviewed his mom about, what he needed to do to win the Heisman. And it was a really cool piece. And so I ended up going to the Heisman and getting to spend time with his mom and his dad and his brothers that were there, and getting to kind of see the experience through their eyes. So I think, that part for me was the very beginning of falling in love with telling athletes stories beyond the field, so that moment was kind of when I realized this is what I want to do. And I want to tell these stories. Of course we'll write about games and we'll give our opinions about teams, but I love telling these stories that these guys that people don't know. So, that was when I first realized it. And then ever since then, I've just been chasing guys' stories. So last year I got very close with a tight end from Colorado State. His name is Trey McBride, and now he's with the Arizona Cardinals. And I told his story, and I was just so fortunate to be let into his world. But he is the first NFL draft pick that was taken in the, I think he was in the second round, but he was the first draft pick with 2 moms. And so I was able to meet, his moms and see their family, that they had created this life for themselves, and how, it wasn't different. It was normal for him. And to kind of promote that, family is family. It doesn't matter, where you come from or who is there for you, the fact that you have a support system like that. So it was the first time I saw women like basically raising this great young man who plays this violent game, but didn't have, a dad or somebody to coach him. And of course his coaches, he said, were like father figures and whatnot. But at the end of the day, two strong women raised this guy to be one of the best tight ends in the nation. So I think that's incredible. So that was a great moment for me. And then this year we took Joey Chestnut with us, to some football games. If you don't know who that is, he's the world hot dog champion, and a good friend of ours. And we took him out to Coastal Carolina and he ate pizza against the players in the locker room. So we got to be in the locker room after the game and film that moment. So that I'll never forget that. And I'm so grateful to Coastal Carolina for letting us be a part of that. So we're hoping to do more of that this year with teams, and excited to join food and football together.
And my last question is, what is a typical day like for you in the off season compared to on game days?
That's a really good question, because people don't realize what a game day looks like. When I tell people I'm a sports writer, they're like, "Oh, that's so cool. You get to go to games and have fun." It's like, no, it's not. I mean, it is fun, but it's not what people think. So a normal week during the season would look like about Thursday, Friday, starting to travel wherever we're going. And then, if the game is a morning game, let's say it's a noon game, we have to be at the game 3 hours before the game starts, 3 to 4, depending on how big it is. My photographer likes to get in there. She likes to shoot the stadium. We like to get a lay of the land. We like to get, our feet on the ground. So if you're looking at 12 o'clock kickoff, we're there at 9 a.m. At the latest, and we're walking in, we're getting set up, and then we're there all game. She's on the field shooting. I'm up in the press box, giving observations, all kinds of stuff. We meet up at halftime. I usually bring her water because she's dying on the field. I try and bring her some food, and then we go up for the second half finish, and then we do the post game. So it's like after the game's over, we have to interview the players and the coach, and then we have to write a story, and we have to pull the photos and put together what you guys see, on the website, and that takes another hour or two. So we're at the game, for 3 hours before, then you have a 4-hour game, and then we're there about 3 hours after, and then we're still working from the hotel after that. So game days and game weekends are very, very exhausting. That's why you really have to love what you do in this industry, because it is just a grind, like start to finish, but it's in the best way possible. But in the off season, it's nice. On the weekends, I get to be home. I live in a very beautiful place called Pebble Beach. So I get to golf when I can, and I get to walk by the ocean, and I've started to learn how to garden in the off season. So I'm trying to grow some plants, but they'll be dead now that I have to travel. But it's weird to go from normal life, and then into this craziness that is college football. But I wouldn't have it any other way. It's the best. So.
Are you a big baseball fan?
I worked in baseball over my career. I worked for the San Francisco Giants. I worked for the Cardinals minor league team. So I do like baseball, but having worked in it, it's so crazy that I've kind of taken like a break with baseball, taking some space. But I do like the game, and I follow it. Are you a big baseball fan?
Yeah, as you can see, I'm wearing
I see a Philly shirt. Yeah.
Yeah.
How are the Phillies doing this year?
They fired their manager, like I think it was 1 month ago or something like that.
Oh boy, that's tough.
And now they are like 10 games above 500.
Oh wow. Okay, so
Yeah,
that was the right decision. All right. Good.
and they got a big series coming up this weekend against the Mets.
Nice.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
the Mets have been on a roll.
Yeah, that's what somebody said to me the other day, and it was like surprising to hear that the Mets are good, but that's good for them. I love to see when teams that come out of nowhere and they're like, they get hot like that. It's fun. That's what's fun about baseball, is all of a sudden you could just start streaking, and then you're good. So, well, that's fun. And I hope they beat the Mets then.
So I want to thank you so much for coming on, and I'll definitely have you back on during the season, and we can maybe preview or recap games.
Absolutely. Anytime, if I have the time, I will do it and we'll talk football. I love it. And I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.